Hello, everyone. Well, amidst the chaos of the Emergency Measures Act in Ottawa, and then the subsequent rescinding of that act last night by our Prime Minister, we now have the Ukraine in crisis, as war has definitely been proceeded with by the Russians. But I want to talk to you about my experiences in Ottawa because I've had some time to process and just feel compelled to share with you some of the takeaways I have. So I spent about 18 days on the streets of Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy, and I'll call it a Freedom Convoy. I can hardly say the word protest because no one was shouting. People weren't shouting at each other, or it was very quiet. So processing my time there, what I saw, what I heard, and what I learned is just profound for me. It wasn't about being vaccinated or unvaccinated. In fact, most of the people I met there were vaccinated. They were there because they saw the great overreach of our government, and they've been seeing it for a long time. And as you saw then with the Emergency Measures Act, that came front and center. And I think a lot of Canadians now have woken up to the fact of the injustice that's being handed down through our government. So these are my personal experiences and perception. Keep that in mind. Just while driving to Ottawa, it was a humbling and overwhelming experience because people were lining the streets. And you've seen the pictures, you've watched the news, even the news reported on it, although not lots of it. The mainstream news, I mean. They were at the corners of every little intersection and lined the streets in every little town, some standing there in the bitter cold for like minus 30 degrees for hours. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians from coast to coast came out to cheer on those truckers that were coming from the east and the west and the north and the south. I have a short video I want to share with you. Drumming for Canada, Michelle and
Jerry.
Good to see you. This is wonderful.
We're here for freedom for our nation.
Awesome.
Representing the First Nations people across Canada.
Yeah.
Virtually the same cottage, just put out the same design that we've got. Not as nice a lot as ours. And just sold for $1,075,000.
Beautiful. Thank you, ladies. And look at you. Just a second. I want to see if I can get the snowbank. They're standing in this huge snowbank. Oh my goodness, girls. Thank you so much.
Freedom!
There were many on the Hill. They spoke. They shared their hearts in the midst of all of this. Never in my life have I witnessed such love amongst the people. Love, compassion, the hope, and godly presence was there. As soon as we got to Ottawa, it was just this sense of hope, overwhelming hope. There was no disorder on the streets. It was peaceful. Now, I know you've heard of some of the well, there were two incidences particularly. Those were not really instigated by the truckers. Well, the Terry Fox one, yes, somebody put a Canadian flag on Terry Fox, and that obviously was wrong. Although I had found, I actually saw that previously in a gay parade, they put a gay flag on Terry Fox. There was no pride then. So we need to look at the injustice. But I want to talk to you about the people who had never met, that came together coast to coast, multicultural, hugging, holding each other tightly, crying, celebrating freedom to be, freedom to associate, free to congregate. Yes, the horns beeped. They honked constantly for the first week. After all, this was supposed to be a protest. But we prayed over the police. We prayed over one another on the streets. People preached. Worship arose. Many accepted Christ. There were many that were baptized in local churches as a result of the presence of God in the midst of the people on the streets of Ottawa. These days were probably some of the most profound and powerful that I have ever experienced. And I think most people who were attending would say the same thing. So what was really happening? Here's what I believe. The Ekklesia was meeting. So what does that mean, Ekklesia? Well, that's the word that Jesus used to describe the church. And it was the word used in Greek and Roman times to describe a secular institution. So it's interesting. Think about this. Jesus used the same word to describe his church, but Greeks and Romans used that word to describe a secular institution operating in the marketplace in a governmental capacity. When I read that, I went, oh my goodness, that is exactly what we were doing. We were the Ekklesia, meeting openly in the marketplace in a governmental capacity. It was just so profound when I read this. And so I'm going to quote Ed Silvaso. And this is what he says. The objective of the church was the transformation of people and society, rather than it being a transfer station for saved souls on their way to heaven. The church wasn't about a building, and we've all heard this before, but really, I've never experienced the church being the church as it was in Ottawa. It was my biggest takeaway, the greatest revelation I have had about this whole experience. That's what was happening. The Ekklesia was meeting on the streets, and the impact and the transformation of lives is going to continue for years. And I pray that we wouldn't let go of what we found. You know, we were going from something wrong to something more. The church was meeting constantly, even in the bitter cold, greeting one another, caring for each other, sharing food. Bob and I had the privilege of cooking breakfast and serving people and having a great big carafe of coffee. And that's what the carafe looks like. It's one of those old juice containers, remember from church picnics? Anyways, amazing. This thing kept hot coffee hot for 12 hours. And if there was any left, when I poured it out, it was still steaming hot. Wow. Note to self, never get rid of this. So these are the things that were happening. And you know, crime dropped 80% while the truckers were there. Can you imagine? The church, the people in society were able to actually police themselves. If anybody got out of line, the truckers would surround them. In fact, when we were standing face to face with the police, one man was getting really agitated. He was really upset. And you can understand, if you were there, the upset, because the police were attacking. They'd been attacking people. They'd been beating people. And this man was upset. And 2 or 3 women surrounded him because he was yelling at the police. They surrounded him, and I went over as well and just hugged him and loved on him. It was the most amazing thing. And then they just gently calmed him down, and he talked for a while, and then he went on his way. This was the church in action, folks. It almost brings tears now when I think of it. Violence didn't erupt from the people. It erupted from those who were ordered by our government to restrain the people. That's the sad thing. Those in the police force who actually acted unjustly, and there were very few of them, but there were enough to make it very difficult. You know, we prayed over the police as they pushed us back. We prayed for their families. We prayed. We knelt down in the streets and prayed the Lord's Prayer. We sang. We reached out in love. This was the most amazing experience. And there was a sense for me personally, and I shared this in another video, I had no sense of fear And I'm not senseless. I don't see myself as senseless. I knew that I was to be there. I knew that God had called me there and to stand with the people. There was no fear. Whatever was to come, I was not afraid. And I mean, I was fortunate. I wasn't beaten, but I was not afraid. And I couldn't help but think afterward, this must be what it feels like when Christians stand face to face with evil. Now, I'm not suggesting the police on the front line, all of them were evil. They weren't. But there were some, the minority, that had evil intent. And the peace of God was there. We went from something wrong to something more in that place. God was in our midst. Hearts were touched and lives were transformed. This is what I found on the streets of Ottawa. May it continue. May this transformation of the church continue. May the people of God continue to move in the marketplace.